Mosaic, a daily news program from Link TV, presents a selection of news reports from independent and state-controlled broadcasters from throughout the Middle East.
Al Arabiya satellite channel lost 3 of its journalists who were covering the latest events in Iraq after the shrines at the mosque of Imam Ali al-Hadi and Hassan al-Askari in Samarra were attacked. The international organization, Reporters Without Borders, says that the number of journalists who have been killed since the invasion of Iraq in April 2003 has reached 76, 40 of whom were Iraqis. The series of killings of journalists in Iraq is on the rise. The latest episode claimed the lives of 3 journalists working for Al Arabiya satellite channel while they were covering the riots inspired by the attacks on the shrines of Imams Ali al-Hadi and Hassan al-Askari in Samarra, 120 kilometers north of the capital, Baghdad. The victims were anchorwoman Atwar Bahjat, photographer Adnan Khairallah, and soundman Khalid Mohsin, whose bodies were found by the Iraqi police north of Samarra. What did you see?
I saw a crew from Al Arabiya. Then a group of armed men confronted and killed them. We brought them to the hospital.
How many were there?
3.
According to eyewitnesses, the 3 journalists were kidnapped by unknown armed men. They say the armed men refused to listen to journalist Atwar Bahjat and forced her and her crew into their car, after which they drove off to an unknown location. With this criminal act, the number of journalists who have died since the fall of Baghdad in 2003 has exceeded 76, mostly Iraqis. Since the beginning, it became very clear that journalists were target of attacks in the American war on Iraq. One day before the occupation forces overthrew Saddam's regime and took control of the Iraqi capital, the local head office of Al Jazeera satellite channel was blown up by a United States tank, which killed reporter Talib Ayyub. On the same day, Palestine Hotel, which journalists thought was a safe place, became the target of attacks, killing and wounding several foreign journalists. This dangerous atmosphere did not deter those who work in this profession of trial and tribulation, as they flood Iraq from all parts of the world to cover the events and report any new developments about this land where much blood has been shed. Journalists have been recently targeted because they have tried to blow the cover on the atrocities that took place behind walls. This was what happened to Reuters cameraman Mazen Adanna, who is a Palestinian. He was killed while he was covering what was happening inside the infamous Abu Ghraib prison in August 2003. Journalists have also been caught in the crossfire, including suicide bombs and booby-trapped cars. Others were kidnapped, some of whom were lucky enough to be released, like the 2 French journalists who were recently kidnapped. However, some others were found dead after negotiations with their kidnappers failed to reach a resolution. In spite of all efforts to provide as much security to journalists in Iraq as possible, observers contended that it has become difficult to ensure total safety in a country that has become a minefield in the last 3 years.
The Israeli occupation forces have escalated their attacks on the Palestinian civilians in the governorate of the Gaza Strip, where Sulaiman Hamada and Zaid ibn Abdel Fattah were killed in the southern area. Meanwhile, the Israeli army continues to bomb northern Gaza.
4 civilians were targeted today as the Israeli occupation forces escalated its attacks at the Qusufim corridor, which separates Gaza and Israel, near the town of Deir al-Balah, killing Zaid Abdel Fattah Dukham and Sulayman Hamaida. A third man was wounded while the fourth was detained for questioning. The occupation forces delivered the bodies of the deceased to their families.
How do I feel? I feel like a father whose son has just been martyred. But we all have the potential to be martyred. I have 10 other sons who, God willing, will also have the opportunity.
If a man has lost 2 brothers, you know one is in prison, the other is badly injured. How do you expect me to feel? This is the reality lived by the Palestinian people.
The escalation of attacks by the Israeli government has caused an outrage by Palestinians, hundreds of whom took to the streets of Gaza in protest and condemnation of the Zionist attacks on the refugee camps of Yatta. Several Palestinian factions have threatened to retaliate.
The world must condemn this occupation which kills children, women, men, and the elderly, and destroys the Palestinian people. The Quartet Committee must also condemn this dreadful occupation. It is obvious that our best option to rid ourselves of the occupation is the resistance, God willing.
Hamas is a resistance movement that stresses the resistance over any other means, especially in light of the horrible Zionist acts against our people in the Gaza Strip, Nablus, and the West Bank.
The northern part of Gaza was also not immune to attacks, as tens of Israeli bombs were fired at several Palestinian targets. An Israeli plane fired a missile at a car near the northern border separating the Strip and Israel. 2 of the passengers were wounded while the third was unharmed. The continued Israeli escalation of attacks comes after senior Hamas leaders started making preparations to form the upcoming government. The Palestinian public has demanded a response to these outrageous Israeli attacks and crimes, especially from the Hamas movement. Isra al-Bihaisi, Gaza, Palestine.
The Palestinian Authority spokesperson Nabil Abu Rudaina announced that President Mahmoud Abbas called for the convening of the UN Security Council to discuss the continued Israeli aggression on Palestinian territories after Israeli Prime Minister Ehud Olmert threatened to continue military raids on Palestinian cities unabated. He also announced that Hamas will not be a partner in any agreements or negotiations. Yehudat Ahronot revealed that Avi Ditcher, former head of Shin Bet, Israel's internal security services, said that designated Palestinian Prime Minister Ismail Haniyeh may be a target for assassination in the event that Hamas attacks the occupation.
Mishal's public star rocketed in 1997 when he survived the Mossad's failed attempt on his life in Jordan. His profile came to the fore once again when he led the Hamas delegation during the first Cairo ceasefire talks that began in November 2002 in the run-up to the invasion of Iraq. It was the first indication of Hamas's political weight and importance in the Palestinian decision-making. From the day it was formed in 1987 with the First Intifada, Hamas was viewed by Yasser Arafat as part of the Palestinian chaos. Until 2002, Hamas and jihad activists were left to state security investigations. Mishal's meetings with Minister Omar Suleiman in November 2002 was thus the first official Arab recognition of its newly accepted status. But when the first round of talks among Palestinian factions opened in February 2003, Mishal met with Mahmoud Abbas, the then second man in the PLO, for the first time in the history of the organization. Mishal was born into a middle-class Palestinian family in a village in Ramallah in 1956. In 1967, his family moved to Kuwait, where his father was the imam of a local mosque. He joined the Muslim Brotherhood in his teens and led the Islamic Palestinian student movement in Kuwait University, where he graduated with a BA in physics. By 1987, Hamas was already formed, and Mishal had contributed to founding it at the age of 31. Until he left Kuwait to Jordan following the Second Gulf War in 1990, Mishal worked as a physics teacher. In Amman, he joined Hamas's Politburo and was elected as its head in 1996. Mishal's increased popularity following the 1997 attempt on his life, which prompted him to leave later, and he left to Qatar, where he resumed his activity. Mishal goes on to say, "We talk to the world in a language it understands, but we won't pretend to be something we're not." When asked about sacrificing operations in the Green Line, he said it angers international public opinion, but still you must observe the Palestinian popular mood. We live under occupation. We do not have the traditional tools of warfare. At the same time, we repeatedly demanded that Israel does not target Palestinian civilians. We repeatedly made that call, but Israel never listened.
Thousands of citizens took to the streets of Gaza last night, protesting the Israeli killing of 5 people in the Balata refugee camp in the town of Nablus. The march was instigated by Hamas and was joined by several of its leaders, including Ismail Haniyeh, who will be forming the upcoming Palestinian government. In a speech conducted earlier, Haniyeh called on his people to strengthen their national unity in the face of Israeli aggression.
We are preparing to form the new Palestinian government. We strive to create a government of national unity. Here, we are negotiating with the national and Islamic factions and the different personalities and layers of our Palestinian people. Let us build our country and reconstruct what the Zionist occupation has destroyed. And I assure you, my esteemed brothers, that the negotiations with the brethren in the different factions are positive, and God willing, they will witness wonderful results. I want to assure you that our Islamic and Arab movement stands beside the Palestinian people. This movement is prepared to stand by the Palestinian government and by the Palestinian people. Our greetings and best wishes to our Arab and Islamic nation.
What are the main points you discussed with Mr. Al-Sam Al-Ahmed today?
We discussed the possibility of participation of Fatah bloc in the Legislative Council. They addressed that they are ready, but they have to discuss all the details to reach to a formula that satisfies all the Palestinian factions in order to bypass the Israeli pressure and also to answer the question concerning the internal and external relationship.
Dr. Ahmad, will the disagreements over political agendas between Fatah and Hamas become obstacles in the way of reaching an agreement over national unity government?
We are under occupation. Our main concern is to end occupation and provide the Palestinian people with the necessities of life, such as education and health services. These things can't be provided without dealing with the occupation, and so we are forced to go back to the political process. Of course, advancing the political process is the basis of the meeting.
Are the differences or the political agendas that Ahmad talked about the same points that were addressed during the meetings with Abbas concerning the formation of the government?
The political agenda that the new government will agree on is the one that will be submitted to the Legislative Council. Based on this agenda, the government will receive a vote of confidence. If this should happen, the agenda will be accepted as the official agenda for the government and whoever joins it. We are trying to address the needs of the Palestinian people and address all questions concerning relations at the internal level and with Islamic and Arab nations and the world.
Dr. Ahmad, did you find flexibility among Hamas about the importance of being bound by agreements that were signed already?
This was the focus of our discussion during the meeting. This is the foundation of the next political step. We have sensed from statements by our brothers in Hamas that they are trying to get closer to us concerning this topic. But we still need more clarity and understanding on this issue.
اسمح لي أن أوضح بعض النقاط في هذا الموضوع.
Allow me to clarify some points on this subject. First of all, the position of Hamas in these issues was not changed. We accept what serves the interests of the Palestinian people, and we and the rest of Palestinian factions will reconsider what we see as harmful to the interests of the Palestinian position. Thus, we must find a resolution that is satisfactory for all parties while maintaining the interests of the Palestinian people served.
Abu Khalid, what is the possibility that the upcoming Hamas government will be committed to the agreement signed by the Palestinian Liberation Organization and the Arab Peace Initiative?
One of our goals is to keep the Palestinian people inside strongly linked to the Palestinian people outside. The Palestinian Authority should not only represent part of the Palestinian people who live in one part of the land. The Charter of the Palestinian Liberation Organization must be rewritten on new bases, and the political agendas must be respecified because many articles were violated in the past period. When the Charter of the Palestinian Liberation Organization is rewritten on a new basis, agreed upon by all Palestinian factions that want to participate through the accepted mechanism, then the Palestinian Liberation Organization will become a tool that we will use jointly to serve the interests of the Palestinian people living inside and outside.
Yesterday, Rice met with Saudi Foreign Minister Prince Saud Al Faisal in Riyadh. Rice tried to convince her Saudi counterpart to cut off funding to the Hamas terror organization. However, the Saudis refused to deny foreign aid to the Hamas-led Palestinian Authority. Saudi Arabia is the second Arab ally of the U.S. to rebuff Rice's request after the Egyptian foreign minister told her that the world should not prejudge Hamas. The Saudis plan to continue sending approximately $15 million a month to the Palestinian government. U.S. officials said they did not expect to win any promises from their Arab allies on the issue.
A good life for the Palestinian people requires cooperation with Israel. It does. It's simply a fact of life of the way that the Palestinian economy and the Israeli economies work.
How do we distinguish between humanitarian and non-humanitarian aid? Is festering sewage in Gaza an infrastructure project or a humanitarian aid project? They need both infrastructure and humanitarian aid.
Jihan Sadat opened the new museum in honor of former President Anwar Sadat. The museum showcases a collection of the late president's memorabilia, including hundreds of photographs chronicling his life, which ended with his assassination in 1981. Ayman Sayed attended the opening ceremony and gave us this report.
We have purified our souls. There are men in the army whose capability, morality, and patriotism we trust and on whom we depend for our security. No doubt, all of Egypt will welcome this news with joy. I want to assure the Egyptian people that the army today is working for the sake of our homeland.
Because Sadat was a veteran of war, an advocate of peace, and a prominent historical personality who has had an impact on the life of Egypt and on the Middle East as a whole, his museum is hosted at the Pharaonic Village complex to commemorate and honor this hero who sacrificed his life for the sake of his country. 25 years after his death, the Anwar Sadat Museum was opened to take new generations in sound and picture on a short trip through the life of Sadat from 1918 to 1981. Jihan Sadat, the wife of the late president, opened the museum accompanied by many political, intellectual, and media figures from different countries. Usama Elbaz, political consultant to the president, and Dr. Ismat Abdel Magid, former Egyptian foreign minister, were among the attendees. Jihan Sadat expressed her delight at the great interest she witnessed at the Anwar Sadat Museum and said her wish was the continued expansion of the museum as well as seeing Egyptian youth and children having the opportunity to attend the museum to learn about the late president and the time in which he lived.
تتاح الفرصة للشباب والأطفال في مصر للحضور إلى المتحف من أجل التعرف على عصر الرئيس الراحل وأن يتم تطوير هذا المتحف.
كفاية لا كفاية لا.
Enough? No, not enough. But it's a good start. I like humble beginnings which start slowly on a small scale then keep getting bigger. It's better than nothing and better than waiting for something big that may never happen. And as I said in my opening statement, it's an opportunity that I hope will continue growing larger and better until it's truly suitable for his memory.
The
museum showcases some of the late president's personal possessions, from his pipe to his rosary, as well as photographs capturing historic moments in his life when he attended Egypt's military college, passing through the Sinai War and ending with the day of his assassination and martyrdom after leading the country to victory through some of the most honorable battles in Egypt's history.
I think it is a great opportunity for younger Egyptians and even the elderly in Egypt to learn about some of President Sadat's achievements and to get to know his multifaceted personality. Egyptian youth must learn about their country's modern history and take pride in it.
Sadat was engaged in two battles, one on the battlefield and the other one when he wanted to liberate the land and bring peace and victory. This is also what former Foreign Minister Dr. Ismat Abdelmajid and notable writer Anis Mansour stressed in their opening statements. Mansour indicated that he owns some of the late president's personal belongings, which he plans to present to the museum as a gift to complete its collection. Dr. Abdel Salam Ragab, head of the pharaonic village, announced that the images showcased by the museum are not available anywhere else in the world. Ragab said that the pictures were given to him as a gift from former American President Jimmy Carter.
All my life, I have admired President Sadat. For a while, I was living abroad, which gave me the opportunity to see the strong effect that Sadat had on Western countries. I also received help. President Carter, for example, was very fond of President Sadat, and it was he who opened his private collection for me and asked me to choose any items I wished to take. So, we were able to acquire a large number of photographs, personal memoirs in Sadat's own handwriting, as well as letters to President Carter. We intend on expanding and renovating the Sadat Museum, especially after Anis Mansour, the notable writer, announced that he too was going to donate the memorabilia he has of Sadat.
The museum also contains a replica of the Suez Canal with its eastern and western banks that were the stage on which the October War in 1973 took place, in addition to a collection of photographs of Camp David in which President Sadat is joined by former Israeli Prime Minister Menachem Begin and former U.S. President Jimmy Carter at the resort. A quarter of a century after his passing, Muhammad Anwar Sadat remains a hero of war and a hero of peace. This museum is only a small gesture to commemorate and honor his memory. Ayman Sayed, Nile TV News, Cairo.
The views expressed on Mosaic are not those of Link TV or its sponsors, but of the broadcasters themselves. Mosaic is made possible by a grant from the John S. and James L. Knight Foundation, which promotes journalism excellence worldwide and invests in the vitality of 26 U.S. communities, and the William and Flora Hewlett Foundation. Additional support is provided by the Firedoll Foundation and Henry and Virgilia Dakin.